Also, we have the incredible privilege today to begin Meseches Megillah Shechionu V'Kimonu V'Giyonu Lazman Hazeh, our second Masechta Mishna Yomi. We begin today with Parak Aleph, Meseches Megillah, Mishnayis Aleph and Beis. Mishnah Aleph reads as follows: Megillah Nikreis Ba'achad Asar, B'Shneim Asar, B'Shlosha Asar, Ba'arba Asar, B'Chamisha Asar, Lo Pachos V'Lo Yoser. As we're going to see, and we'll see this develop in the coming Mishnayis, the earliest date on which one could read the Megillah is the 11th of Adar, and the latest date ultimately is the 15th of Adar. Lo pachos v'lo yoser. You can never read earlier than the 11th, nor can you ever read later than the 15th. So how do we know which places read on which date? So the Mishnah explains: Karakin hamukafin chomam mimos Yeshua benun. Walled cities that were walled from the times of Yehoshua ben Nun, Korin b'chamisha asar. They read on the 15th of Adar. Kfarim va'ayoros gedolos, villages and unwalled cities. Essentially, all unwalled cities have the same halacha. So whether they're small villages, whether they're large unwalled cities, they all have the same halacha, and they read on the 14th. The difference is elo shakvarim makdimin liyom haknisa. What's interesting is as follows: is that often the small villages did not have a minyan, or they did not have someone who was able to read Megillah for them. So the Kfarim were often allowed to advance the reading of the Megillah to the nearest market day. What we call the Yom HaKnisa, the market day, or also the day in which they came to adjudicate their cases, were Mondays and Thursdays, where the villagers would go to the nearest large city to adjudicate their cases and also to engage in commerce. So the Mishnah says, here's essentially what we have is walled cities read on the 15th of Adar. Walled cities because that resembles Shushan. Shushan, the capital city of Achashverosh's empire, was a walled city, and therefore in Shushan they went ahead and they read on the 15th. So therefore, again, any city which has a wall from the times of Yehoshua ben Nun will read on the 15th as well. Unwalled cities, which includes large cities as well as villages, read on the 14th, but villages again have the ability, if necessary, to advance their reading to the nearest Monday or Thursday, which is called the Yom HaKnisa, the day of entry into the larger cities. That's Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Beis. Now the Mishnah begins to explain how all of these dates actually play out. So the Mishnah says, Ketzad, so let's say the 14th of Adar falls out on a Monday. So remember again, this Mishnah is operating with the idea that there are two primary dates for the reading of the Megillah. 14th of Adar is for unwalled cities. 15th of Adar is for walled cities. Again, this says in the Megillah, and this is how we understand halacha. The difference is, again, what the Mishnah is going to spend its time on is what we do with villages. Because again, as we mentioned before in the previous Mishnah, villages have the ability to advance their reading to the nearest Monday or Thursday, so they could avail themselves of a minyan and have someone to read the Megillah. So Ketzad, Chalios Arba Asar B'Sheni, if the 14th of Adar falls out on a Monday, so this is an easy case. So in this case, villages and large unwalled cities will read on that day, because since it's a Monday, villages are fine also, and of course unwalled cities always read on the 14th. And walled cities will read on the next day, which is the 15th. What happens if the 14th of Adar falls out on a Tuesday or a Wednesday? So ultimately, again, the villages could advance their reading to the previous Monday. So remember, again, if the 14th falls out, for example, on a Wednesday, so that means again Tuesday is the 13th, Monday will be the 12th. Large unwalled cities will read on that day, and walled cities will read the next day. Beautiful. What happens if the 14th of Adar falls out on a Thursday? So once again, so both villages and large unwalled cities will read on that day because it's a Thursday, so it's a market day anyway. And walled cities will read the next day, which is Friday the 15th. Chalios Erev Shabbos. What happens if the 14th falls out on a Friday? Kfarim makdimin liyom haknisa. In that case, villages will read on Thursday. And ultimately, again, in this case, interestingly enough, is, remember, the Gemara discusses, we don't read Megillah on Shabbos. And the reason we don't read Megillah on Shabbos is what's called Gezerah Dirabba. Rabba's Gezerah. Rabba's Gezerah was a general concern that because not everyone is proficient in the reading of the Megillah, so a person may end up carrying the Megillah to someone to read it for them, and may end up transgressing the prohibition of Hotzah, the Malacha of Hotzah, transferring an item from one domain to another. So interestingly enough, listen to this case. So when the 14th of Adar falls out on a Friday, so you have a very unique situation. The villages will push it back one day to the 13th. They'll read on Thursday. The large unwalled cities, as well as the walled cities, will all read on that Friday. So you see something very interesting, that when the 15th falls out on a Shabbos, walled cities will advance their reading to Friday, Erev Shabbos. Because remember, as you saw in Mishna Aleph, the latest time to read the Megillah is the 15th. So you can't wait until Sunday, because Sunday will already be the 16th. Chal Yos b'Shabbos. What happens if the 14th falls out on Shabbos itself? So in this case, Kfarim va'ayaros gedolos makdimin v'karn liyom haknisa. So here's what's interesting. If the 14th falls out on a Shabbos, since already the villages are going to be advancing it back to Thursday, we just move the villages and the unwalled cities together. In other words, once the unwalled cities already are not going to be reading on the 14th because it's Shabbos, we might as well align them with the villages. We push everyone back, meaning the villages and the unwalled cities, back to Thursday. But ultimately, again, the walled cities can read on Sunday, because Sunday will be the 15th. Chalios achar HaShabbos. What happens again if it turns out that the 14th falls out on Sunday? Kfarim makdim liyom haknisa. So in this case, again, the small villages will push their reading back, ultimately, again, to Thursday. Now, by the way, this becomes the earliest possible date to read the Megillah, because this would be the 11th of Adar. Va'ayaros gedolos korim bo bayom. Large unwalled cities will read that day on Sunday. Umukafas choma lemachar. And ultimately, again, walled cities the next day, Monday the 15th. So therefore, again, what Mishnah Beis essentially does is just illustrate the concept in Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Aleph said the earliest time to read the Megillah ultimately is going to be the 11th. And again, that case comes up when the 14th falls out on a Sunday. In that case, the villages will be reading on the previous Thursday, which is the 11th. Unwalled cities on Sunday the 14th, walled cities on Monday the 15th. And the latest time one can read the Megillah is the 15th, again, as evidenced in all of these cases in the Mishnah. So we will stop over here for today. Emir Hashem tomorrow, we will continue with Mishnayos Gimel and Dalid, wishing everyone a wonderful day and Mazel Tov on the new beginning of the Masechta.